Hi, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join today. My name is Evan Rutchick, and I'm the CRO for Ogury here in the US. We are super excited to launch our new virtual event series called the Vertical Spotlight Series. This three-part series will showcase mobile user behavior trends within specific verticals. And today we're going to be discussing telehealth. And before we jump into the content, I just want to give a quick overview of who Ogury is for those who might be unfamiliar. Founded in 2014, Ogury is the creator of the first advertising engine driven by user choice. Ogury's advertising engine is fundamentally built on user consent and preferences towards data sharing and ad experience. And it's fueled by our unique, reliable mobile user and behavior data from over 400 million consented user profiles globally. And it's powered by our purpose-built algorithms and our innovative ad formats. Okay, let's get into it. So today I'll be discussing various media and market trends. Our healthcare category lead, Nena Slifer, will then take a deep dive into telehealth and share the key behavioral changes that we've identified with our data. And then finally, we'll end with a virtual chat between Nena and McCann Health Engagement's president, Jeffrey Erb. We're super excited to have him here. But before we dig into telehealth, I wanted to kick this off by sharing the broader media consumption and market trends that really have occurred over these last couple months. First, we'll talk about media consumption. Driven by a combination of the effects of COVID-19 crisis and pre-pandemic trends, eMarketer predicts that the average time US consumers are spending with media will actually rise by more than 1 hour per day this year, up to 13 hours and 35 minutes. Honestly, I don't know about you, but mine has definitely risen by at least 5 hours a day, it seems like. But what devices are users actually turning to? And the GWI released a report that was showcasing the increase in media device usage due to the coronavirus outbreak among internet users. So here's what it looks like as a breakdown for the US. As you can see here on the chart, right, mobile has had the greatest shift in digital behavior out of all the forms of media. This then followed by laptop usage and PC desktop usage, and then followed by smart TVs. Now, I was initially pretty surprised to see how much mobile usage had increased in comparison to smart TVs, just given the fact that we're all locked up at home. But then I thought about how my wife has officially claimed our TV and how my mobile has actually turned into my mini pocket-sized TV. So for me, it's my smart TV on the go. And in addition to a mini laptop, right, game console, and then any other forms of media on the list. Now let's look at how media consumption can change more long-term. Right? eMarketer recently released a report that reveals the share of average time spent with media in the US, ranging from 2018 to the future, 2022. And to no surprise, digital media far outweighs traditional media such as TV, radio, and print, with 55% of the share. And to even no more surprise, mobile tops the list of digital. So we know Americans are spending more time consuming media, and we know, of course, that they're spending more of their time on their mobile devices. So what exactly are they doing on those devices? And before I share those explicit behavioral trends that we've identified, I'll first give you a refresh on Ogury's tool, Active Insights, right? So as I mentioned before, everything that Ogury does is based on consented users. So Ogury is collecting traceable and trusted user consent through our consent and preference management platform. We then will start to gather the consented signals from multiple sources across the device. Leveraging our purpose-built algorithms will ultimately transform these signals, these consented signals, into a unique, reliable understanding of that mobile user and their journey on their device. And this ultimately provides us with a view of installed apps, usage of the apps, and websites browsed, and demographics of these particular users. And then our tool, Active Insights, will visualize these insights and visualize this data to make them directly actionable, of which exactly we'll be walking you through today. So first, we'll discuss some of the trends. Right? Based on app possession increases from March 15th to April 15th, we identified some significant shifts in these key verticals and categories. And with more and more people staying home, by choice or not, there has been an increased need for pet care and pet items, with ownership of pet care related apps increasing by 60% over that time frame. Food delivery has increased by 47%. Within the healthcare category, we're seeing major shifts, with telehealth app ownership growing by 75% in that time frame, just 1 month. Of course, we'll be discussing this in much more detail later. And also, of course, video conferencing apps have grown drastically as people have to adapt to working from home. And in addition, grocery delivery and virtual party apps, as well as other simulator games, have increased dramatically as well, right? People getting their groceries delivered to home, people trying to stay connected with their friends and family with the virtual party apps. In terms of what has decreased, this might not be a surprise, but sports content related apps has had a very significant decline in app possession, with people deleting them directly off their phone. So what are these users actually doing instead as their behaviors have shifted? Well, in addition to looking at these behavioral trends through this category lens, we also want to look at it from a persona-based trends and a persona-based change. So we pulled 2 specific persona studies to identify behavioral changes of what we call the sports enthusiast and the frequent traveler. And these are the 2 categories that I think we all would agree were impacted fairly significantly because of the pandemic. So we wanted to pull these two personas to see how their behavior would shift during this outbreak. So first we'll start with the sports enthusiast. So the apps and the sites that we no longer see show an affinity or reach among sports enthusiasts include different college sports outlets, such as like college basketball live scores or daily sports updates, including Pro Sports Daily, and then team ranking outlets like teamrankings.com, right? With no live sports, there's nothing to track on a daily basis. So that makes sense. Apps and sites where we see a decrease in affinity or reach also include sports news and viewing like ESPN, different fantasy football outlets like CBS Sports Fantasy, or video storytelling outlets like Great Big Story. But what's really interesting to know in this is what sports enthusiasts are actually doing instead of what they normally would have done. And our consented user data actually reveals that the sports enthusiasts are now turning to gaming and e-games as a result of little to no coverage of live sports events across the world. So they're engaging with gaming apps like Game of Thrones Conquest, or esports sites like Rift Herald, and gaming review sites like Giant Bomb. Just because we can't watch live sports doesn't mean we can't stay entertained, and this is where people are flocking to in this category. Another category that's been significantly impacted by the pandemic is obviously travel, right? So we wanted to take a deeper dive and a look at the behavioral changes of this frequent traveler persona. And these travelers are no longer showing an affinity or reach for things like airline rewards, right? As a Sky Miler, you're not checking your miles if you're not flying frequently, obviously. And airport-specific apps like United Mileage Plus and MyTSA, they're not getting a lot of affinity or reach. Booking apps like Hostel World, they show a less of an affinity for car rentals, including rentalcars.com and Hertz, as well as the travel aggregator apps like Skyscanner. Like, they just have a huge decrease in reach and affinity for this audience. Interestingly, we're seeing an increased affinity or reach in home rental apps like StreetEasy, alcohol delivery apps, including Vivino, and photo editing apps like Photo Editor Pro. What I found most interesting in this study, if you're comparing to the sports enthusiast study, is that the travelers are still interested in travel, and they show an increased affinity to the trip planning apps like TripIt and travel information sites like Travel Weekly Update, right? So it indicates that they're still interested, or they're still planning these future trips, and they might be experiencing some of these behavioral changes, but they're really eager to get back out there and see the world. Whereas the sports enthusiasts have been able to replace their sports cravings with games. And there's obviously a lot more I can share on these personas, as well as other personas that we've seen pretty massive behavioral shifts in. But I want to pass this over to Nena to discuss with you what you joined for and what you joined us to hear about, which is telehealth.
Thanks, Evan. I'm going to begin by giving an overview of how the healthcare vertical has been impacted by COVID-19 outbreak more broadly. And then we're going to dig a little deeper into the telehealth space using Ogury's consented data. So since Americans have begun practicing social distancing, 1 in 3 people have canceled upcoming medical appointments due to COVID-19. As we're all aware, people are avoiding physical locations and staying home, particularly avoiding hospitals and doctors' offices. They're also concerned about the impact of the pandemic on their health and their wallets and are behaving accordingly. Research by PwC's Health Research Institute found that 32% of survey respondents had already made or are planning adjustments to their spending on healthcare visits as a result of COVID-19. So what will this look like in the short term? Well, 78% of these consumers said that they would skip at least one visit, such as a well visit, a maintenance visit for a chronic illness, elective procedure, or recommended lab test or screening. It's clear that user behavior is shifting when it comes to how we seek medical support. So how are they seeking medical support? The same survey shared that there has been an explosion in telehealth, which unveils new uses as well as new users. In fact, 5% of American consumers reported that they or a family member used telehealth for the first time during the pandemic. While this may not look like a big number, when looking at the broader US population, this could mean 16.5 million Americans have started using telehealth in the past couple of months alone. And 88% of these new users said they would use it again. This reveals a significant role that telehealth will have on the future of the healthcare industry, and the world is realizing this. There has been an outstanding amount of interest in the digital healthcare alternative, with all major US publications currently discussing it. It is interesting to think about how long we've been discussing this as a group, and now it's not only a nice to have, but truly a need to have. So what does this look like for the future of our industry? Based on a survey by Sage Growth Partner and Black Book Market Research, 25% of consumer respondents had used telehealth prior to the current COVID-19 pandemic. 59% reported that they are more likely to use telehealth services now versus previously, and 33% would even leave their current physician for a provider who offered telehealth access. Clearly, the future of this category is massive. In fact, Global Market Insights predicts the telemedicine market to be valued at $175.5 billion by 2026. So now let's go into a deeper dive in understanding on how the telemedicine landscape has evolved by digging into some of Ogury's data. We'll start by looking at how behavior has changed over time. The first telemedicine study we pulled was in 2018, and that's important because it puts the March 23rd possession growth spike into perspective. While we've seen a slow and steady incline in adoption with annual spikes around cold and flu season, the 700% increase happened in the beginning of March this year around COVID's peak in the US. The charts below the trend line on the left and on the right illustrate the massive year-over-year difference in market share and the peaks and valleys of those differences. While 2018 and 2019's data falls in line with promotional efforts for these vendors, the 2019 and 2020 data reflect the response to our current climate with Teladoc taking the majority market share from Doctor on Demand. Now let's take a look at the overall landscape. The study we are reviewing now is comprised of roughly 170,000 unique devices who have used one or more platforms in the last 12 months. The inputs of this study are the major nationally known telehealth platforms, both sites and apps like Teladoc, Amwell, Doctor on Demand, as well as EMR platforms like CareCloud. As mentioned in the previous slide, Teladoc has the largest audience size, while Amwell has the least. I do want to caveat that despite Amwell being only at 7% market share, they do white label their services to major hospital systems across the US, and this is not being captured in this study. Another call out to make is the alarming exclusivity within this category. You will notice in the third column that Teladoc users are 97% exclusive to that platform, and Doctor on Demand only falling behind 5 percentage points at 93%. I truly attribute this high exclusivity to the alignment with the health insurance coverage and the cumbersome process of uploading EMRs and other patient information. Now that we understand the landscape, let's take a closer look at the user. This next report focuses on the general persona attributes of the telehealth user. Overall, users of telemedicine apps are driven primarily by females, representing 60% of the audience. They tend to be older, with the majority of users ranging between the ages of 35 and 54. While both of those stats are very similar to the 2018 report, the Midwest and the southern regions of the US are most representative in telemedicine as it relates to the new 2020 study. Now let's take a look at their top interests. Their top interest revolves around their medical health. Users of this category are 6 times more likely than the general population to own apps within this category. Given their likelihood to adopt a new way of connecting with their doctor, they're also tech savvy with other health-related tracker apps. Within the medical health category, we uncover that they're most interested in Delta Dental, CVS, and MyQuest apps, along with several apps that are associated with different comorbidities. Telemedicine apps, specifically Teladoc, Doctor on Demand, Live Health, and MD Live, not only reach the highest percentage of users, but also over-index with user affinity. Food and drink and healthy living apps are also among their top interests. App affinity indicates users are frequent restaurant goers who prefer healthier alternatives like HelloFresh and Panera Bread. This audience keeps their health top of mind and turn to healthy living apps to maintain or lose weight. App usage also indicates that this audience who is more likely to utilize wearable technology like Fitbits. Here we can see their discriminant behaviors as it relates to both sites and apps. The most discriminant app for telemedicine users is United Healthcare. Their most discriminant site is the Daily Deal. One of the highest reaching and discriminant apps among the users is Omada, an app promoting establishing healthy living habits. Sites like Personal Capital indicate that users are focused on their finances and investments, while Disney suggests that they're more likely to be parents to younger children. To narrow in further, I took a look at an app universe of the Doctor on Demand app to see where else these users are engaged. Here you'll see that the users digitally manage their health using apps like MyChart, and they use RX services like GoodRx and Express Scripts. So we know that Americans are turning to their phones to communicate with doctors and to manage their health. And we understand the behaviors of the telehealth app user. What we really need to know is how that differs based on condition. Before I reveal some final insights, I wanted to see which conditions impact user adoption of telehealth services most. Looking back at that PwC report I referenced earlier, here's a breakdown by health status of the 5% of consumers who said they used telehealth for the first time during the pandemic. As you can see, a large majority of the new adopters used the platform for chronic illness, complex chronic illnesses, and mental health. Now, let's see what the nuances are within these conditions. I pulled a couple of studies to better understand the behaviors of users who engage with both diabetes and telehealth apps and sites, as well as telehealth and mental health related apps and sites. Let's start with diabetes. 61% of this persona group are female. This is interesting because diabetes in general skews more male, so it reveals that women are more likely the first adopters of telehealth and or caregivers. Additionally, 87% of these users are above 35. And these users are digital first. They are over 11 times more likely than the general population to own Publix delivery app, as they not turn to their mobile device for medical help, but also to have groceries and essentials delivered to their homes. All right, now let's look at mental health. Similarly, this group skews more female at 74%. Unlike the other user group, this user skews much younger with 61% below the age of 34. When looking at interest, the medical health category topped the list, with stress and anxiety related apps being top apps within the list. They also show a strong interest in pet related apps and are over 22 times more likely than the general population to own the dog training or clicker app by Doggo, which I find really interesting and relevant based on what Evan shared earlier with possession growth of dog trainer and pet trainer apps increased by 64% since the beginning of March. There's clearly so much more that we could discuss in terms of our insights, but I'm going to wrap this up with a summary of some key takeaways. The first is that the adoption of telehealth is undeniable and it's only going to continue to increase. Second, if you want to understand the needs of these telehealth adopters, you need to access truly reliable mobile user data. And third, if you want to reach them effectively, you need to implement an impactful mobile branding experience driven by user choice. We'll dig into this a little bit more during our discussion. Hi, I'm Nena Slifer, Healthcare Category Lead at Ogury, and today we have with us Jeffrey Erb, President of McCann Health Engagement. Thank you for joining us, Jeff.
Thanks for having me, Nena. Appreciate it.
So just to kick things off a little bit, I wanted to find out, why don't you first introduce yourself, tell us about your role, and also let us know which app you've been using most since the pandemic started.
Well, as you said, I'm Jeffrey Erb. I'm the president of McCann Health Engagement, and we are the media and insights group within McCann Health as a large organization. As far as an app goes, it's interesting because I don't know that my usage of apps has changed too much. It's been my workload hasn't slowed. If anything, it's increased. So my app usage kind of sticks to the same things. I'm an avid social media user with regards to posting random tidbits. So between LinkedIn and an occasion in between meetings, I might play a turn of Scrabble. But other than that, it's been pretty consistent for me.
Maybe Zoom.
Well,
right?
Not on my phone. I thought you meant an app on my phone. So yeah, if we're talking about a computer as well, then I would say I use a hell of a lot of Teams and some Zoom occasionally.
Excellent. Yeah. Zoom app on my phone has saved me several times. Well, good. So you saw in today's deck that media consumption is obviously rising, particularly mobile media consumption. Have you changed your media strategy at all to accommodate this for any of the brands that you work with?
Well, the way we look at it is it's really kind of driving what we think is most effective and appropriate for the brand, generally speaking. So I would say that, our approach with regards to, since the pandemic has kind of gone into effect, hasn't changed with regards to the way that we look at the appropriate audience and how to target them. And we have a very heavy digital focus to begin with. So when we look at the best ways to connect and engage with people, it really kind of comes from a foundation of understanding them as individuals and making sure we're connecting with them in ways that are going to be really meaningful to them. And also, I would say, if anything, it's really important when we're looking at that in a scenario like the one that we're in, because you want to make sure that you're sensitive to their needs and to the things that they might be going through. So as it relates to changes in media, the area that I would say probably has changed the most significantly would be around supporting conferences, because so many conferences have gone digital, and it's been more about how do you surround and support those attendees who are now not in a geographic location, but are scattered remotely from a digital perspective. And then, of course, on the consumer side, leveraging and utilizing telehealth.
Excellent. And then, some of the teams here, like the teammates that touch pharma and healthcare, we've really been tasked by a lot of agencies and brands directly on learning more about both the advertising opportunities within telehealth, but then just in general, I feel like everybody is in information gathering mode. Is there anything specific that your agency has done to respond to this influx and rise of telehealth? And have your clients been asking for, point of views? Can you give us any intel into kind of how your agency is responding to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were ahead of the curve because we had started even before this pandemic working on some telehealth strategies with our clients in conjunction with a vendor called Populous, who some people may be familiar with, who's really aggregating a lot of the different telehealth opportunities into kind of a single focused solution. And so we put together a number of POVs around the entire topic from a telehealth perspective that tie not just about how are we engaging from a media perspective, but also what are different ways that we're communicating as an agency within that environment, and or supporting physicians or consumers who are now going to have to change the way they do things from a communications perspective. So there's a number of different things to look at. It's what are new ways to connect within the telehealth environment from an advertising and marketing perspective, but also how do you utilize that most effectively? How do you utilize a new channel in ways that are meaningful and relevant for that channel, so that you're not just taking existing ways of doing things and trying to apply them into a new channel. And then, of course, how do you support through all different kinds of media the experiences that people are having? Because to many people, it's an entirely new experience, whether it's on the professional side or the consumer side.
And would you say that, besides populist media, are there any other opportunities out there in relation to telehealth, or, that POC connection while the consumers are waiting for their doctors?
Yeah, we've seen a few different kind of one-off scenarios from some providers of telehealth, where they might have done kind of one deal with one brand. The challenge around that from a brand perspective is, and this is one of the things that a company like Populous solves, is that you've got to go and negotiate completely different experiences, and that's kind of what Populous has done, is pre-negotiate and arrange for those different individual experiences for you, because they don't have the different telehealth experiences are really different. It's not all one kind of video solution. There's asynchronous, there's a lot of different, there's contextual. So there's a lot of different ways that people are connecting and engaging. And then recently you've seen some other companies come forward with regards to solutions that they're putting forward. I know that Checked Up, I believe, is an organization that's recently announced a telehealth solution where I believe what they're doing is encouraging their physicians that are utilizing their screens already to convert to a telehealth experience utilizing their platform as opposed to existing platforms. And they're looking to provide a solution within that. So I think from a group perspective around the different types, it's few and far between. And the one I would say probably has the largest footprint right now is certainly Populous Media. The other thing that was interesting is when you look at other ways to go about things, there's also a lot of the EHRs have telehealth already embedded in it. So I know that there are ways to kind of look at it from the other side of the fence, relating to, are you able to target physicians within their EHR and kind of leverage that as a telehealth experience, even though it's not quite exactly the same thing.
Yeah, and I don't think the industry was ready for this, massive uptick, and even the potential or exploring the ad monetization of these platforms. I don't think it was a priority whatsoever until now. Yeah,
well, I think generally speaking, as a whole, like I said, we were looking at it for our clients because, we try to stay ahead of things. We're always looking for new ways of bringing interesting and innovative solutions to our clients. And I saw telehealth as something that was going to be exploding. And it was on a curve. It was on a significant uptick. But the COVID scenario really changed the ballgame. Now it's, when you've got every single talking head on television telling people to utilize telehealth, you've suddenly created an environment where, the market needs to catch up.
And with some of the research that we kind of went through earlier, as well as thinking about these platforms and the amount of willingness that patients are to answer questions about, their health or, discovery of new treatment options and ways of delivering care, what do you think is the main driver behind the patient's willingness to share all this personal data within these platforms or, within some of these research studies?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think, from my perspective, when you really look at that as a whole, and the way that people have their entire process of engaging with media has evolved, what you really find is that we've, to some degree, been training people to be comfortable with relinquishing personal information in a way that allows them to be able to accept the use of technology in this fashion. People have, they give up more information on social media than, anybody who wanted to spy on that could possibly have ever predicted. But, and so, honestly, I think that we've evolved as a culture with regards to the way that what we're comfortable with, as long as we understand that there's a way for us to ensure that it's secure and be able to not have it if we choose not to. And I think, and that's really kind of what you're, what the overall objective is. It's making sure that not only do people are they willing to provide it, they're willing to provide it as long as they feel comfortable with the fact that it's being taken care of in a way that's relevant to them as an individual.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense and handled responsibly. Yeah. And just one more question, because we're running out of time. But, some brands are on, some brands are off, especially as it relates, obviously, to healthcare and pharma. Some are taking a backseat because they're working on a vaccine. Some are really focused on the price sensitivity around affordability. What brands do today will be remembered for a lifetime. It's never been more important for brand marketing to be empathetic, relevant, and to add value. The final question to close out this discussion is, what marketing advice would you give healthcare marketers today? Just keeping all that in mind.
Sure. So I would say there's two things when you kind of look at that in the context of what you just said. One of them is it's very important to be aware of what everybody else is doing as well. And, you want to make sure that you're not contributing to the noise. So it's kind of a knee-jerk reaction for people to want to go and give people advice on what to do in a pandemic and how to address things from a COVID-19 perspective. But there's so many people doing that it becomes, quite honestly, not beneficial to the consumer, because you're creating an environment where they're getting more confused because of the amount of information that they're receiving. And I think what's really important is to understand your audience and be sensitive to what their individual needs are in order to and really utilize the data side of things to get to that and connect with them in a way that's going to be meaningful and respectful, and also sensitive to their thoughts and what they may be going through or may not be going through. So it's kind of bringing the whole concept of that personalized connection really to the forefront, and especially moving forward with regards to the ways that we're understanding people and relating to them.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. And I appreciate your time and your perspective, because, I feel like, again, everybody's in fact-finding mode, and any discussion pertaining telehealth is so highly relevant right now. And, with your expertise and your background, this has been extraordinary. So I thank you on behalf of all of us at Ogury for being a part of our team and a part of this event.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm pleased to be here, and I really appreciate the time.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon, Jeff. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.